This is Dominissimo Voxlore, delivering transmissions from the dark heart of the Imperium. In this broadcast, we turn our gaze to the flame-wreathed daughters of the Ecclesiarchy, the holy warriors of unshakable faith, the Adepta Sororitas, the sisters of battle. Their story is not one of glory, it is one of sacrifice, rebirth, fury, and above all, creed. Steel your mind, open your book of litanies, and kneel only to the throne. This is the voice of Dominissimo, and this is the law of the unyielding. Long before the thunder of bolt guns echoed through cathedral halls, before the Sororitas banners adorned 1,000 shrine worlds, they were known only as the daughters of the Emperor. Their origin was not born of doctrine but devotion. On the isolated world of San Leor, nestled within the Calaxis sector, a sect of women dedicated themselves wholly to the worship of the Emperor, not as a general or a warlord, but as a divine god. San Leor, though remote, was not insignificant, an arid world marked by jagged mountains and shrines carved into the bones of ancient rock. It was a place of isolation, perfectly suited to monastic contemplation. Here, the daughters of the Emperor lived in austere solitude. They trained as warriors, yes, but their blade work was penance, not pride. They fasted, they prayed, they purified their flesh through pain, and above all, they believed. Their martial skills were unmatched by any other on their world. Clad in crimson robes and wielding relic blades, they acted as guardians for their temples, protectors of their own creed. Yet they had no dreams of conquest, no ambitions to leave their home. That was, until the Imperium came for them, not in search of allies, but pawns. It was the 36th millennium, and the Imperium was ablaze with heresy and corruption. At its core was a man whose name would become synonymous with tyranny, Goj Vandire. Vandire held the unprecedented position of both High Lord of the Administratum and Ecclesiarch of the Adeptus Ministorum, a fusion of powers so vast it violated the very structure of the Imperium. Under his hand, the Imperium buckled into chaos. Vandire's reign became known as the Reign of Blood, and it was during this time that he discovered San Leor and the women who lived there. It is said that Vandire's interest in the daughters began not through strategic need, but superstition. He had heard whispers of a militant sisterhood unwavering in their worship of the Emperor. Vandire, always obsessed with displays of divine favour, travelled to San Leor not as a conqueror, but as a saviour. There, on the steps of the Grand Temple of the Daughters, Vandire met them for the first time. The Daughters, seeing only another Imperial envoy, refused him entrance. Their loyalty was to the Emperor, and no man, High Lord or otherwise, could presume command of them. But Vandire, ever cunning, staged a miracle. Calling forward one of his guards, he ordered the man to raise his weapon and shoot him. As the gun fired, the shot struck Vandire's Rosarius, a device that projected a powerful energy field, deflecting the blast in a shimmer of holy light. The daughters, never having seen such technology before, fell to their knees. To them, the Emperor had intervened directly. Here was a man who could not die by the hand of another. Surely he bore the Emperor's blessing. In that moment, the daughters of the Emperor swore loyalty to Vandire. They became his elite guard, his fanatical enforcers. He renamed them the Brides of the Emperor, dressing them in black armour and setting them upon the path of war. From that day forward, they no longer stood in sanctums of quiet reflection. They marched through fire and flame, their swords an extension of Vandire's wrath. Though their hearts remained devout, their cause was now twisted. They served not the Emperor's will, but the ambition of a madman. This betrayal of their sacred duty would not be known to them for years. Under Vandire's command, they enforced his tyrannical decrees, slaughtered dissenters, and watched in silence as he drained entire worlds to feed his wars. But they believed. They believed that every order came from the divine, that their deeds, no matter how brutal, were sanctified by the Emperor himself. To understand the Sisters of Battle, one must understand this moment, the wound at the heart of their history. They were not created by the Emperor, they were forged by lies and misused faith. And yet, from this darkness, a light would emerge. The brides of the Emperor, though misguided, were not heretics. Their loyalty to the Emperor remained absolute. It was only their understanding that had been manipulated. Their fall was not one of malice, but of innocence weaponized. When the Adeptus Custodes intervened, when they brought Alicia Dominica, their greatest champion, to the Golden Throne, that illusion was shattered. In the Emperor's presence, the truth was made known. The women who had once served the tyrant became his true daughters, reborn not in shame, but in purpose. But that is a story for another chapter. Here we end where it began, in the quiet deserts of San Lior, where devotion was pure, untouched by politics of war. The daughters of the Emperor were not made to kill, they were made to believe, and belief, in the Imperium of man, is the sharpest weapon of all. At the centre of this empire-wide collapse was Goj Vandire, a man who began as a bureaucrat and rose to become a tyrant unlike any the Imperium had ever known. Through political manipulation and sheer audacity, Vandire attained two of the most powerful positions in the Imperium, Master of the Administratum and Ecclesiarch of the Adeptus Ministorum, effectively placing the entire civilian, administrative and religious machinery of the Imperium under a single autocratic rule. Such concentration of power was unprecedented. The High Lords of Terror were meant to be a council, a balance of power between the various branches of the imperial governance. Vandire turned that balance into a farce. He silenced dissent through assassinations, purges and propaganda. His grip on the Imperium became absolute. But unlike so many tyrants before him, Vandire cloaked his cruelty in the robes of piety. He claimed divine mandate. He spoke as if his voice was the voice of the Emperor, and as his madness deepened, he began to believe it. Under Vandire's orders, the Ecclesiarchy began to exact ruinous tithes on imperial worlds. Entire populations were sacrificed to the bureaucracy's insatiable demands. If a planet's output fell short even by a fraction, it was branded heretical. Billions died under the weight of his decrees, and all in the name of cleansing impurity. And wherever Vandire's will extended, so too did his enforcers. The brides of the Emperor, once the pious daughters of San Lior, now stood as the spear point of his dogma. Their power armour, newly forged in the manufactoriums of Mars, gleamed black beneath cathedral spires. Their bolters sang sermons of fire and death. They were not inquisitive, not reflective, they obeyed, and in doing so they became the instruments of one man's twisted vision. To the common citizen they were terrifying, saints with guns, women whose faith could not be questioned and whose mercy could not be found. Their presence meant judgment, not from law, not from reason, but from scripture as interpreted by a lunatic. But even they could not see the full extent of Vandire's madness. While the brides carried out cleansings across the Imperium, Vandire transformed the ecclesiarchal palace into a fortress temple. The once majestic basilicas of terror were now choked with banners bearing his name, his creed, his image. He had icons of himself sculpted into saintly poses, replacing martyrs with mirrors. Sermons delivered in his voice were broadcast to the hive cities of terror day and night. Worse still, he weaponized belief. He knew the Imperium was built on faith, so he turned it inward. Preachers were ordered to condemn doubt as treason. Confessors who once inspired the faithful were now instructed to root out insufficient zeal. Those who questioned the ruin of their worlds, the starvation of their children, were publicly flayed or immolated before their fellow citizens. To suffer was to serve, to question was to sin. And all the while the brides of the Emperor stood silent witness, never doubting, never hesitating. They led pogroms on hundreds of worlds, and Nostrati they aided in the execution of over 14 billion people. An entire planet burned from orbit under Vandire's command. The Order of the Fiery Heart, freshly forged from the most zealous of the brides, became infamous during these campaigns. They marched through charred cities like the wrath of a god incarnate. There was no subtlety, only purification. But while Vandire's terror reached every corner of the Imperium, not all bowed their heads. Whispers of resistance began to stir. A man named Sebastian Thor, a preacher exiled from the heart of the Ministorium, began to draw crowds. His voice was not angry, it was sorrowful. He did not scream vengeance, he preached compassion, humility, and the Emperor's true light. Thor denounced Vandire, not with violence, but with truth. And truth, in an empire of lies, is heresy. His following grew exponentially, not merely among the poor, but among soldiers, planetary governors, and even members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Thor's movement became known as the Confederation of Light, a name that echoed across hive towers and wastelands alike. For the first time in decades, hope flickered again. Vandire responded with fury. He declared Thor a heretic, excommunicated him in every sector, and dispatched the brides of the Emperor to crush his following. But Thor had already slipped beyond their reach. From world to world, his words sparked fires Vandire could not extinguish. Eventually, Thor and his followers launched the Terran Crusade, a bold push to confront Vandire on Holy Terror itself. This was no minor rebellion. The Terran Crusade was backed by Space Marines, elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and even disillusioned members of the Imperial Guard. What began as sermons became full-scale civil war. Vandire's grip was weakening. Inside the ecclesiarchal palace, paranoia consumed him. He fortified his citadel, flooding it with loyalist cultists and deploying the brides in endless rotations. He no longer trusted his generals, he heard voices in the walls. It is said he spent his final weeks speaking to his reflection, seeking reassurance that he was, in fact, divine. The siege of the ecclesiarchal palace would last months. The brides of the Emperor, though outnumbered, fought with such fanaticism that even Space Marines were stunned. They did not retreat, they did not surrender. They sang hymns as they fell, and it was during the siege that the Adeptus Custodes made their move. Silent since the heresy, the Custodians now emerged from the shadow of the Golden Throne. They approached the leader of the brides, Alicia Dominica, and spoke no words. They led her and 5 of her most trusted sisters through the halls of the palace, past locked sanctums no outsider had walked in for thousands of years. They brought them to him, to the Emperor. No record exists of what transpired within that chamber. No sister has ever spoken of it. But when Alicia Dominica emerged, her sword was already drawn, and Goj Vandire, screaming of betrayal and divine injustice, was struck down not by Thor, not by the Inquisition, but by the hand of the very sister who had once called herself his bride. The reign of blood ended not with revolution, but with an execution. The execution of Goj Vandire was not a conclusion, it was a rupture. In the corridors of power on Terra, silence fell. But across the Imperium, questions raged. How had one man corrupted the Imperium's 2 greatest institutions? How had the Ecclesiarchy and the Administratum become one man's altar? And how, above all, could it be prevented from ever happening again? Into this maelstrom stepped Sebastian Thor. Thor, former outcast preacher turned leader of the Confederation of Light, had not sought power, but the Imperium, bleeding and rudderless, demanded it. At the unanimous decree of the High Lords, he was appointed as the new Ecclesiarch, and the 292nd to hold the title. Unlike those before him, Thor wore no gold, he carried no sceptres. His first address to the Terran Synod was delivered not in the opulence of the ecclesiarchal cathedral, but in the scorched ruins of a burned-out chapel, one of many destroyed under Vandire's orders. It was here that Thor declared his vision. The Reformation edicts were sweeping. He denounced the corruption of the ministerium, the cult of personality, and the militarization of the clergy. He ordered the disbandment of Fraterist Templar cults and banned lay preachers from commanding armed forces. But the most pivotal decree, the one that would shape the future of the Adepta Sororitas, was the Decree Passive. Issued in 288 M36, the Decree Passive forbade the Ecclesiarchy from maintaining men under arms. It was a blunt instrument, a legal wall separating spiritual authority from military power. It ensured that no future ecclesiarch could raise an army or enforce faith with steel. The imperial court would return to preaching, not purging. But there was a loophole. The decree said men. The brides of the emperor were not men, and Thor, perhaps recognising the value in preserving some form of sanctioned militant defence, allowed that loophole to remain. Quietly, respectfully, and under strict supervision, the brides were retained. But they would not remain as they were. Thor did not wish to destroy them, he wished to redeem them. Under his guidance, the brides of the emperor were formally reorganised into a new military organisation, the Adepta Sororitas, or the sisterhood of the Adeptus Ministerium. They would remain the militant arm of the Ecclesiarchy, but restructured, re-educated, and re-purified. No longer would they be blind servants of one man's ambition. Now, they would serve the creed, the Emperor, and only the Emperor. At the centre of this transformation was Alesia Dominica. Having executed Vandire and seen the truth of the Golden Throne with her own eyes, Dominica emerged as more than a leader. She became a symbol of atonement. Her guilt for the role the brides had played in Vandire's tyranny was matched only by her resolve to prevent it from ever happening again. Dominica led the sisterhood's transformation from within. She imposed strict spiritual regimes, enforced new codes of conduct, and personally selected the first cadre of canonesses who would lead the next generation of Vassal Sisters. She demanded not just loyalty, but clarity. The new order's militant were formed around 6 women, Dominica and 5 others who had accompanied her into the Emperor's presence. They were the founding saints of the Adepta Sororitas, though they would not be canonised until centuries later. Each one would become the patron of a major order militant. Alesia Dominica, founder of the Order of the Ebon's Chalice, Saint Catherine of the Order of the Fiery Heart, later renamed the Order of Our Martyred Lady, Saint Mina of the Order of the Bloody Rose, Saint Lucia of the Order of the Valorous Heart, Saint Silvana of the Order of the Argent Shroud, Saint Arabella of the Order of the Sacred Rose. Those orders would become the pillars of the sisterhood, each interpreting the faith in a unique way, but all unified in purpose. They were stationed in 2 new central bastions, designed to keep the sisterhood decentralised and harder to corrupt. The Covenant Prioris on Terra and the Covenant Sanctorum on the Shrine Ward of Ophelia 7. The Orders Prioris, based on Terra, would hold the sacred traditions. The Order Sanctorum, based on Ophelia, would carry those traditions into the wider galaxy. Both covenants operated in tandem, ensuring no single authority could ever twist the sisterhood to serve a false god. The transition was not without friction. Many within the Imperium distrusted the sisters, believing they had been irrevocably stained by their role in the Reign of Blood. But Dominica did not resist scrutiny, she invited it. In public trials and confessional audits, the Sororitas submitted themselves to judgment. And when they were found faithful, they did not boast, they went back to war. Not for glory, for penance. The early centuries of the Adepta Sororitas were marked by acts of extreme devotion. Entire orders embarked on self-imposed pilgrimages to worlds scarred by Vandire's policies, rebuilding temples, orphanages, and places of worship from the ground up. They fought in the wars of faith not just to destroy heresy, but to demonstrate that their weapons served righteousness, not ambition. Dominica herself led many of these campaigns, wherever she appeared moral sword, not from fear but from awe. She was no longer just a warrior, she was becoming something greater. And then, she vanished. At the height of her influence, Alesia Dominica embarked on a pilgrimage into the deep void. She took no army, only a handful of sisters. Her last known words, preserved in the ecclesiarchal script, were simple. The Emperor has called. I go to listen. She was never seen again. Some believe she ascended, body and soul, to join the Emperor in spirit. Others believe she still walks amongst the stars, aiding the faithful in unseen ways. What remains undeniable is this: her legacy was not in her disappearance, it was in what she left behind. By the close of M36, the Adepta Sororitas was no longer an instrument of tyranny, it was a symbol of redemption. Where once they marched for a madman, now they marched for the millions who had suffered in silence. They became the shield of the Ecclesiarchy, not its sword. And as the Imperium rebuilt itself, the Sisters of Battle stood at its heart, not to rule, not to judge, but to ensure that no one would ever again confuse power with righteousness, not while they stood watch. After the reforms of Ecclesiarch Sebastian Thor and the founding of the Adepta Sororitas, the question remained: how would this new force define itself? The horrors of the Age of Apostasy had shattered the trust between the Imperium and its spiritual defenders. The sisterhood, though spared destruction, had to prove it was more than a tool of former tyranny. The answer did not come from legislation or even from terror. It came from the sisters themselves. At the heart of the newly established Order Militant stood 6 women, veterans of the Reign of Blood, survivors of the Emperor's presence, and bearers of a truth that reshaped everything they believed. Together, they became the spiritual foundation of the sisterhood. Their names would echo through history as the six matriarchs, each one the founder of a major order, each one a living embodiment of a sacred ideal. The first and greatest was Alicia Dominica, the woman who had stood before the Golden Throne and returned changed forever. Though her role in executing Vandire sealed her place in Imperial history, it was the order she founded, the Order of the Ebon Chalice, that immortalised her spirit. The Ebon Chalice became known for its rigid adherence to orthodoxy. They carried not just weapons, but the original codices of Thor's reforms. Their discipline is absolute. They view every mission not as deployment, but as a sacrament. Of all the orders, they are the most doctrinal and most exacting, and the least tolerant to deviation. Their armour is trimmed in bone white, a symbol of purity. Their heraldry bears the black chalice, representing not blood, but the burdens of unbreakable faith. In battle, they are calm, precise, and relentless. Every bullet a prayer, every step measured. To serve in the Ebon Chalice is not to choose war, but to embody penance. Where Dominica brought law, Catherine brought passion. A warrior philosopher whose sermons were said to make statues weep, she led the Order of the Fiery Heart, later renamed the Order of Our Martyred Lady in her memory. Catherine's death at the hands of heretics sent shockwaves through the sisterhood. Refusing to let her sacrifice pass quietly, her order repainted their brilliant armour in mourning black, but from that darkness they forged a new identity, one built on the theology of sacrifice. To the Sisters of Our Martyred Lady, martyrdom is not a tragedy. It is the highest possible form of faith. They charge into hopeless odds not for glory, but because no price is too high. Their chants in battle are not for victory, but for remembrance. They are the thunder before judgment, and in every cathedral bearing their symbol, a relic of St. Catherine's remains, her skull, her armour, her heart, enshrined behind walls of gold. Where Catherine tempered zeal with leadership, St. Mina was pure fury. Known as the Crimson Saint, Mina was once a penitent sister who turned battlefield rage into a holy weapon. Her Order of the Bloody Rose honours that legacy with relentless aggression. Unlike other orders, the Bloody Rose encourages emotional expression in combat. Rage is not suppressed, it is consecrated. When their chainsaws ignite, their war hymns shift into roars. Where others form defensive lines, the Bloody Rose forms avalanches. Their crimson and black armour is said to stain even the snow red as they pass. They leave no survivors among heretics, mutants or traitors. Mercy is a sin to them, for to spare the impure is to fail the Emperor. They are the wrath-giving flesh, and in their eyes, only blood can redeem the galaxy. Where Mina embraced flame, St. Lucia stood unshaken. A stoic and quiet leader, Lucia's Order of the Valorous Heart became the shield to the Bloody Rose's sword. Clad in iron-grey armour and hardened by discipline, the Valorous Heart is famed for its endurance in the face of suffering. They do not weep for the fallen, they do not burn in rage, they endure. It was Lucia's teachings that shaped the Order's defining belief: pain is proof of life, and suffering is proof of faith. Her sisters march through artillery fire without flinching. They hold lines against impossible odds. Wounded sisters continue to chant litanies as their blood soaks the ground. To them, faith is not declared, it is tested, and only through suffering can its truth be known. Saint Silvana, the silent guardian, never spoke a word after leaving the Golden Throne. Her silence was not born of trauma, but of enlightenment, or so the Ecclesiarchy claims. Her Order of the Ardent Shroud adopted her stillness and transformed it into a weapon. These sisters strike like phantoms, descending without warning and departing without glory. Their armour gleams silver, not for vanity, but to reflect the Emperor's light into the hearts of those they deliver from heresy. They do not seek recognition, they leave no statues. They are the ghosts of retribution. Where others preach, they watch. Where others sing, they strike. In many campaigns, the enemy did not know they had been targeted by the Argent Shroud until the flames had already engulfed them. Their creed is one of service, not pride. Their silence is not absence, it is judgment. Last among the six in seniority, but not in grace, was Saint Arabella, a healer, artist and visionary. Her Order of the Sacred Rose is the most contemplative of the major orders, focusing not just on warfare, but on beauty, clarity, and the redemptive power of faith. Their hymnals are legendary. Their formations are mathematical in elegance. On the battlefield, they are calm, composed, and precise. Even amid explosions and bloodshed, their lines never break, and their chants never falter. Their ivory white armour and rose sigils are often mistaken for symbols of mercy, but woe to the enemy who sees them only as caretakers. The sacred rose believes that order itself is divine, and any force that brings chaos, be it heretic, alien or demon, must be cut down like a diseased garden. To fight beside them is to witness serenity in violence. Each of these orders would give rise to countless sub-orders, each with their own traditions, saints and battle legacies. But the root of all Sororitas devotion traces back to these 6 women, the matriarchs. Their words are still quoted in sermons, their relics are kept under lock and gene seal, and their example continues to shape every sister who dons the armour and takes up the bolter. Though the galaxy has changed, though the enemies of man are ever multiplying, the legacy of the matriarchs holds firm. For the Order Militant are more than regiments, they are doctrine made flesh. They are 6 roads to the same goal, redemption through faith, victory through sacrifice, and devotion that burns brighter than the stars. In the centuries following the reformation of the Ecclesiarchy, the Imperium found itself battered by rebellion, plagued by apostasy, and weakened by old wounds that refused to close. The Age of Apostasy had left scars across the stars, sectors that no longer heeded terror's voice, governors who ruled like petty kings, and cults had bloomed in the fertile soil of imperial neglect. The Ministerium responded the only way it knew how, not with reform, but with righteous war. Thus were born the Wars of Faith, massive church-sanctioned military crusades declared by high-ranking cardinals or the Ecclesiarch himself to reclaim souls for the Emperor. These were not mere military campaigns, they were apocalyptic spiritual offensives designed to annihilate heresy wherever it grew, no matter the cost in lives or worlds. And at the tip of the ever-holy spear thrust into the dark were the Adepta Sororitas. As a sanctioned military arm of the Ecclesiarchy, the Order Militant did not fight for conquest but for conversion. Every campaign was a pilgrimage with bolters. Every battlefield was a cathedral to be consecrated through blood. They didn't march to expand borders, they marched to purify. The first Great War of Faith erupted in M37, during the rise of Ecclesiarch Benedict IV. He was a firebrand, more preacher than politician, and declared that the Imperium had become spiritually stagnant. Worlds that paid their tithes but did not attend sermons were branded as lukewarm. Whole subsectors were accused of doctrinal laxity. The response was swift, a galaxy-wide summons to arms. Thousands of confessors, missionaries, and sisters of battle were dispatched to reignite the flame of belief. The campaign was brutal. On Cathalamor, the entire ruling aristocracy was executed when they refused to convert their state religion into one that worshipped the Emperor exclusively. On Tarnis, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice razed every spire temple that had dared to house multiple faiths. Even compliant worlds suffered under the weight of sudden Ecclesiarchy inspection forces. Any deviation from the canon Ecclesiasticus was punished with fire. But the Adepta Sororitas were not indiscriminate. Unlike some of the zealot cults that followed in their wake, the sisters fought with purpose. They did not destroy, they remade. In the wake of their purges, they erected ministerium basilicas, organised orphanages, trained new ecclesiarchal officials, and baptised the ashes of the fallen with sacred oil. Their message was clear: you are either a servant of the Emperor or an obstacle to be removed. Over time, the Wars of Faith became a recurring instrument of policy. Whenever the Ecclesiarchy felt its influence waning, or whenever a cardinal's ambition outgrew his sermons, a new war of faith would be declared, and with every new proclamation, more sisters took up arms. By the dawn of M38, the Adepta Sororitas were spread thin across dozens of crusades. Despite their numbers, they were not a limitless resource, and it became common for orders to rotate in and out of conflict zones. This created a cross-pollination of styles, tactics, and doctrines. Sisters of the Bloody Rose fighting beside the Sacred Rose, combining wrath and composure in glorious synergy. Some of the most defining wars of faith came not from Terra, but from Ophelia 7, home of the Covenant Sanctorum. Here, Cardinal Bucarus, later known as the Tyrant of Cathalamor, declared a war of faith that quickly spiraled into heresy itself. Initially, Bucarus claimed he was reclaiming lost systems in the Segmentum Obscurus, but soon his campaign began to resemble an empire-building project. He established personal fiefdoms, executed rival preachers, and declared himself the chosen voice of the Emperor. The Adepta Sororitas were among the first to turn against him. The Order of the Argent Shroud withdrew from his crusade, denounced his claims, and coordinated with loyal inquisitors to expose his duplicity. A bloody internal conflict followed, sisters fighting against former allies, rooting out the rot that had taken hold within their own holy cause. It was a hard lesson. Even a war of faith could be twisted, and the sisters would never again follow a cardinal blindly. But not all was betrayal and ruin. There were triumphs that reshaped entire regions of the Imperium. The Fourth War of Faith, led by Ecclesiarch Deicius VI in M38, saw the establishment of new orders militant and the reclaiming of dozens of fallen shrine worlds. In this campaign, the Order of the Valorous Heart was instrumental in retaking the long-lost world of Sternach, where chaos-worshipping nobles had ruled for generations. The sisters landed in the midst of a warp storm, losing communication with the wider Imperium. For over a year they fought in isolation, holding cathedral ruins against never-ending tides of mutants and traitors. When Imperial reinforcements finally arrived, they found the sisters still alive, their armour in tatters, singing hymns through bloodied vox grills as they stood atop mountains of burning heretics. The victory inspired a tenfold increase in recruitment across the sector. Faith, proven in steel, is the greatest propaganda the Ecclesiarchy can wield. Not all wars of faith are declared in grand councils or imperial chambers. Some begin on backwater worlds where heresy has grown in secret. One of the most chilling examples came in M41, on the shrine world of San Lior, the birthplace of the sisterhood itself. There, a Red Corsair warband attempted to desecrate the sacred ruins of the original Daughters of the Emperor. Their intent was not conquest, it was defilement, to break the spirit of the Sororitas by destroying their roots. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 9 orders diverted from across the Imperium to answer the insult. The war lasted just 13 days. The heretic fleet was burned in orbit, their champions executed with ritual precision. Every defiled shrine was rebuilt, stronger, holier, and angrier. It became known not as a battle, but as a massacre of retribution. To the Adepta Sororitas, these wars are not historical events, they are part of a living scripture. Each campaign is recorded in canon cryptae, with names, dates, and sacrifices inscribed in vaulted halls. Every war hymn sung today was a battlefield where it was first chanted. Every relic carried into battle is soaked in stories. The wars of faith continue to this day. In the Era Indomitus, after the Great Rift tore the galaxy asunder, the Ecclesiarchy has declared an unprecedented number of new Holy Crusades. The Dark Imperium, cut off from terror, is now the target of endless spiritual offensives. Entire flotillas of battle sisters traverse warp-ravaged space to bring the light of the crusade to forsaken worlds. They arrive not as diplomats, not as liberators, but as absolution in armour. And for those that doubt the necessity of such fury, the sisters need only speak a single line. We do not bring war, we bring the Emperor's judgment, and it has no mercy. Martyrdom is not a concept for the sisterhood, it is a doctrine. Unlike the transhuman warriors of the Adepta Sororitas, the sisters are mortal. They do not fight with genetically enhanced bodies or ancient Xenos-derived armour. They bleed, they tire, and they die, often in droves. But unlike other Imperial forces, they welcome this inevitability. Because for the Adepta Sororitas, martyrdom is the purest expression of faith. It is the final proof of loyalty, and it is a weapon as potent as any bolter. The roots of this belief stretch back to the earliest days of the Order's militant. In the wake of the Reign of Blood, the sisterhood emerged under a shadow of suspicion. They had served a tyrant, even if unknowingly. Redemption could not be won by words, it had to be earned in suffering. The early decades of the Reformed Sisterhood saw entire Orders Minor willingly sent on suicide campaigns. They would land on worlds lost to chaos or overrun by greenskins and hold positions to the last sister, buying time for the faithful to flee or reinforcements to arrive. Many of these engagements were never recorded in detail. Only the names of the fallen remain, etched in catacomb walls, sung in chapel hymns, and carried on purity seals by the sisters who came after. But the theology of martyrdom evolved beyond mere necessity. Over centuries it became a culture of holy death, codified, studied, and even celebrated. Each major order maintains a martyr's reliquary, a vault where the remains of the fallen are stored not with mourning, but with reverence. A sister's bones are considered relics. Her blood, if preserved, is often mixed with sacred oils and used to anoint war gear. The idea is not symbolic, it is literal. Her sacrifice becomes part of the weapons that continue her fight. No example speaks louder than the tragedy of Sanctuary 101. Located in the Segmentum Ultima, Sanctuary 101 was a quiet covenant fortress of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, built on a barren moon to monitor fringe activity. For centuries it was peaceful, a place of prayer and training, until in 897 M41 the unthinkable happened. The Necrons came. It was the first time the Imperium had encountered these silent, soulless horrors in any organised form. The sisters stationed there did not know their enemy. There were no battle doctrines to follow, no expectations of rescue. They simply fought. The communications logs recovered later are fragmented. Broken Vox transmissions cut off mid-hymn, final prayers. The last known message, spoken in a whisper by a wounded canoness, was a litany of absolution as she activated the Covenant's self-destruct. When the Order returned to investigate, they found only ruins and not a single Necron corpse. Every sister had died. But their last stand delayed the enemy long enough for a larger Imperial force to prepare. In death they brought time. In death they became more than warriors. They became immortal. To this day, no Order has rebuilt Sanctuary 101. The moon remains a silent tomb. The sisterhood does not mourn it, they protect it, as a holy site where martyrdom was achieved in its purest form. But martyrdom is not always an isolated tragedy. Sometimes it is orchestrated, embraced as a path to penance. Among the most devout and most feared ranks within the sisterhood are the Sisters Repentia. These are battle sisters who have failed in duty, doctrine or spirit. They may have shown hesitation in battle, lapsed in prayer, or perhaps committed a sin known only to their confessor. But instead of exile, they chose redemption through death. Stripped of armour, clad only in rags and parchment scripture, Repentia wield massive eviscerators, two-handed chain blades taller than they are. They charge ahead of the main battle line, screaming hymns as they tear into the enemy without fear or armour. They are expected to die. They intend to die. And yet some do not. The rare few who survive enough battles as Repentia may be offered absolution. Reforged, their names added to the Book of the Redeemed. They may return to the ranks of the Sororitas, scarred, silent and venerated. These sisters are seen as chosen by the Emperor himself, having endured the agony of spiritual rebirth. But not all martyrdom is loud. Some takes the form of quiet, solitary defiance. In the Plague Wars, during the advance of the Death Guard through the Valorian Belt, the world of Ulmus fell under siege by Nurgle's rot. With Imperial forces in retreat and corruption spreading through the soil itself, one Hospitalia, a sister of the non-militant healing orders, refused to leave. Her name was Sister Eleanor. She stayed behind in a refugee crypt beneath the Chapel of St. Jasmine, tending to the dying and those infected beyond hope. For 3 months she administered morphia, chanted prayers and held the hands of the terminal. When the Nurgle cult finally found her, she was kneeling before the corpse of a child, whispering final rites. They offered her corruption, a painless end, an escape from decay. She spat blood into their faces and activated the cryo-seal detonators embedded into the tomb walls. Her martyrdom killed nearly 1,000 infected cultists and denied the enemy a vital foothold. Her name is now spoken every time the Order's Hospitalia deploy in plague zones. Her shrine is built from the chapel rubble. No statue is made in her likeness, only a pair of gloves, scorched black from viral agents, rest upon the altar. And yet, no sister passes them without bowing. In truth, the sisterhood does not seek death for its own sake. They are not suicidal. They are not fanatics in the mindless sense. What separates them from the billions of zealots across the Imperium is intent. They believe that life is a battlefield of tests. Every wound, every loss, every impossible stand is another chance to prove themselves worthy of the Emperor's gaze. If they fall, so be it. But they will fall facing the enemy, bolt gun empty, hymn unfinished. Because for the Adepta Sororitas, martyrdom is not an ending, it is a seed. A story passed down, a fire lit in the hearts of those who remain, and one more name whispered in the cathedrals of tomorrow. Across the long, war-torn centuries of the Imperium, there are moments too perfect to explain, too timely to be coincidence. A single bolter shell shattering a tank's reactor core from 1,000 yards. A sister struck by 100 blades, rising again with no wound. A banner surviving an orbital bombardment untouched, still burning with incense. To the unbeliever, these are anomalies. To the faithful, they are something far greater. Acts of faith. Acts of faith are not psychic phenomena, they are not sorcery, they are not tricks of the warp. The Adepta Sororitas are tested for corruption and mutation more harshly than any other Imperial military order. They do not wield psychic powers, nor do they permit them. Instead, their miracles are understood by the Ecclesiarchy as something altogether purer. They are gifts, granted by the Emperor himself to the most devout. And for those who fight beside the sisters, there is no doubt. They've seen it, they've survived it, they've wept at it. A lone sister of the Argent Shroud, last of her squad, holding a city gate for 6 hours with nothing but a broken flamer and whispered prayers. An Order Hospitalia tending to the wounded as plague rats swarm through trenches, untouched, singing hymns until the rats scatter. A Repentia, standing her ground before a greater demon, refusing to fall even after the creature tears through her entrails, slashing until its form dissipates in a storm of light. No tech adept can explain it, no psycho can duplicate it, but the Sisterhood knows the truth. Faith works. Every order keeps detailed records of its most sacred acts of faith. They are categorized, annotated, passed down through scripture. They vary in nature, some subtle, others apocalyptic. There are known patterns. The hand of the Emperor, when a sister strikes with force far beyond human strength. The divine guidance, when bolts find the unseeable. The holy aegis, when flame or shot is simply turned aside. But there are times when these acts no longer come from within a single sister, but instead emanate from someone more. Someone chosen. A living saint. Of all the miracles in the Sisterhood's long history, none are more revered or more feared than the emergence of a living saint. They are not simply holy warriors, they are beings transfigured, touched by the divine, surrounded by literal halos of golden light, sometimes even resurrected from death itself. And among them, Saint Celestine stands above all. Once a humble Sister Repentia of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, Celestine was believed slain in the cleansing of a heretic stronghold on Eurythian Gamma. Her body was buried beneath the ruins of a shattered chapel. 3 days later, she walked out of the rubble alive, glowing, her wounds healed, her eyes filled with something not of this galaxy. She carried the Ardent Blade, a sword wreathed in fire that has never been identified by any known Forge World. Her armour, gleaming gold, bears purity seals that seem to regenerate. At her side are 2 warrior angels, the Gemini Superior, once canonesses long dead, now restored to fight beside her. Celestine does not command, she appears. Where war grows darkest, she descends like a comet, surrounded by wings of light, her presence igniting bolters and moral alike. Troopers who have fought for months without sleep weep when she passes. The wounded arise, heretics flee, even space marines stand straighter in her presence. It was Celestine who stood against the traitor legions on Cadia during Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade. It was Celestine who walked beside Rabuti Gilliman during the Terran Crusade, guiding the Lord Commander of the Imperium through warp-infested space. And it was Celestine who knelt on the steps of the Imperial Palace, glowing with holy fire, as Gilliman prepared to launch the Indomitus Crusade. She had died countless times since, shot, sliced, vaporized, impaled, and each time she had risen, sometimes within seconds, sometimes days later, among pilgrims, always exactly when she is needed. Her presence confirms what the Ecclesiarchy preaches, but even many struggle to believe. The Emperor lives, and he acts. Other living saints have risen throughout history, some known only to the orders that bore them, others whose names have become sector-wide shrines. Saint Anais, who single-handedly repelled a Dark Elder slave raid with only a broken banner. Saint Dolorosa, who prayed continuously for 7 days while crucified by chaos cultists, causing the heretics to turn on one another in madness. Saint Aspera, who walked unscathed through a plague storm unleashed by the Death Guard, healing those around her by presence alone. Unlike Celestine, most saints do not return. Their miracle is final. They are remembered not for how they died, but for how they transcended death. Their bones become relics, their weapons enshrined, their words carved into basilica walls across the Imperium. Yet every Sister of Battle trains with the knowledge, however quiet, however private, that one day she may be next. Not by ambition, not by expectation, but by grace. And if the Emperor wills it, if she is faithful enough, she may rise above her order and become something more than mortal. This belief changes how sisters fight. Where other armies plan retreats, they plan icons. Where others guard their commanders, they guard their shrines. They do not fear death, they fear insufficiency. Because what if their moment of ascension comes and they are unworthy? Every sister knows that miracles are not guaranteed. They are not tools, they are answers to questions only the Emperor can hear. And so they pray, not for victory, not for glory, but the strength to be vessels, to be ready. In the annals of the Adepta Sororitas, the stories of miracles are not buried at the end. They are at the centre of their history, the heartbeat of the Creed. And while other arms of the Imperium may rely on logic, force, or probability, the sisters rely on something far more dangerous: faith unchained. The Sisters of Battle are not deployed as line infantry. They are not siege specialists nor planetary conquerors in any conventional sense. The Astra Militarum wages wars of scale, the Adeptus Astartes strike with surgical fury, but the Sororitas serve a different purpose, less visible, yet no less vital. They are the shield bearers of spiritual purity. Wherever the light of Imperial Creed flickers, wherever corruption gnaws at the roots of loyalty, the sisters are there, often without fanfare, often without glory. Their role is not just to kill the enemy, but to preserve the soul of mankind from the rot of heresy, apostasy, and compromise. Their authority does not come from battlefield command, but from doctrine. Backed by the Ecclesiarchy, the Sororitas have the power to investigate, censure, and, if necessary, cleanse the very institutions of the Imperium. They may walk unchallenged into an administratum archive, a governor's palace, or a hive cathedral. If the scent of heresy lingers, they are not required to request permission, they are required to act. This makes them feared, even among Imperial allies. When a Sororitas task force arrives on a shrine world or a frontier colony, it is rarely by accident. Their ships are austere, void black and gold, adorned with statues of saints and floodlit cruciform halls. To the faithful, their coming is a beacon of reassurance. To the guilty, it is the sound of judgment approaching on thrumming engines. In many sectors, their appearance has become a test of loyalty. Planetary governors with nothing to hide greet them in the open. Those with secrets retreat into red tape, delaying formal receptions, hiding behind adepts. It never works. The sisters are trained to see the hesitation not as incompetence, but as guilt made manifest. This investigative role becomes most visible in their work with the Order Hereticus, the branch of the Inquisition charged with rooting out internal threats to the Imperium. Rogue psychers, unsanctioned cults, apostate preachers, tainted governors all fall within their purview, and while the Inquisition operates from the shadows, the Adepta Sororitas represent the blunt edge of doctrinal enforcement. The agreement binding them together, known as the Convocation of Nephilim, remains sealed in the archives of terror, but its result is clear. When an Inquisitor of the Order Hereticus moves to purge a world, Sisters of Battle follow, not as pawns, as equals. Together, they make an unrelenting team, one wielding law, the other fire. When a Sororitas unit is attached to an inquisitional retinue, their presence does more than ensure compliance, it radiates certainty. The kind that cannot be reasoned with, the kind that does not waver when the heretic pleads. It is not cruelty, it is conviction. On worlds where chaos has left its subtle fingerprints, the sisters are often dispatched long before the corruption surfaces. A drop in confessional attendance, a change in shrine liturgies, a governor who delays tithes but expands his pleasure domes. These are not random anomalies, they are warnings to those trained to see them, and so the sisters arrive. Sometimes quietly, sometimes with orbital landings that shake the ground beneath. They do not arrive to ask questions, they arrive to listen to the sermons, the whispers, the patterns in the prayers of the people. If they find nothing, they leave no mark. If they find doubt, they light the pyres. But while they are the judges of faith, the sisters are also the defenders of the faithful. Nowhere is more visible than in the defence of shrine worlds, planets covered in cathedrals, reliquaries, and tombs of saints. These worlds are spiritual anchors for entire sectors, their pilgrimages feeding not just belief but commerce and morale. They are vulnerable, and so they are protected often solely by orders militant. One such world is Ophelia 7, seat of the Covenant Sanctorum. Here, the Sororitas are more than soldiers. They are administrators, teachers, confessors, and archivists. They maintain the Litanic Archives, a vault of sacred writing so vast it spans 5 subterranean levels, each guarded by flame traps and oaths bound in blood. Access requires no passcode, but a proof of faith measured in deeds. Sisters raised on shrine worlds learn that battle is only part of their duty. Just as vital is ritual discipline, maintaining relics, training novices, and tending to the spiritual needs of the populations around them. A failing morale can kill a world as quickly as an orbital strike. In such times, the presence of a single canoness walking barefoot through the market square can reignite belief in thousands. To some, these sisters seem cold, humourless, unbending, severe. But to the devout, they are guardian angels in flesh. This dual nature, disciplinarian and protector, makes the Sororitas uniquely placed among Imperial forces. They are trusted where the Commissariat is feared. They are respected where the Arbites are resented. They are listened to where the Adeptus Mechanicus is ignored. And this is by design. The Sisterhood is trained not only to fight, but to teach, to lead, and above all, to watch. Even within the Ecclesiarchy, the Sororitas maintain internal oversight. Orders Pronatus handle relic curation, Orders Dialogus translate ancient dialects and monitor theological compliance. Orders Famulaus are embedded in noble houses, influencing dynastic policies to ensure the planetary rulers remain loyal in thought as well as in action. If a noble line begins to drift into decadence, a Famulaus sister might arrange a politically advantageous betrothal. If a confessor's sermons begin to lean towards self-glorification, a Dialogus may rewrite his liturgies and lose the originals. These are not assassins or spies, they are keepers of the sacred order. It is often said in the Ecclesiarchy that when faith falters, it is the sisters who carry it. But it is not only heresy they stand against, it is apathy, the slow, quiet erosion of passion. The moment when a citizen stops attending sermons, when a governor omits the emperor's name in public addresses, when hope thins and no one notices, the sisters notice. They do not forget, they do not forgive the sin of spiritual neglect. For in the endless war to preserve mankind's body, the sisterhood is tasked with preserving its soul, and if that soul ever shatters, if that belief that binds the Imperium ever dims too far to reignite, it will not be a commissar who sounds the final judgment. It will be a sister of battle, kneeling at the ashes of a world, whispering prayers for a people who forgot who they were. The opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, was not just a cataclysm. It was a severing of reality itself. Entire sectors of the Imperium would plunge into the warp's embrace, lost in screaming silence. Communication failed, astropaths went mad. Even the most faithful cried out for signs from Terra, only to be met with whispers from the dark. This new age, known as the Era Indomitus, has pushed the Imperium to the brink. And yet, amid the collapse, the Adepta Sororitas have not broken. They have not paused, they have multiplied. If the Age of Apostasy taught them penance, and the wars of faith taught them fire, then the Era Indomitus has taught them persistence without clarity, to act without orders, to lead without contact, and to carry faith where no light remains. Cut off from Terra, many orders militant have become entirely autonomous. Their canonesses are now spiritual generals, missionary lords, and matriarchal crusaders rolled into one. With no guidance but their own faith, they have launched independent campaigns across the Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium. These are not organised crusades, they are pilgrimages of war. A sisterhood flotilla will arrive at a world darkened by warp storms, its population half mad and half doomed. The Sororitas land in force, not to negotiate but to ignite. Sermons ring out across void fortresses. Enemy commanders wake to churches rebuilt overnight. Cults are broken in fire and sacrament, the people rise again. Often not even remembering why they feared, only knowing that hope returned wearing armour and a fleur-de-lis. Across these fractured stars, rumours bloom like wildfire. A battle covenant that travels between void stations, leaving behind glowing relics and whispers of burning winged martyrs. An order minoris that appears in warp-broken systems with no warning, cleanses the corruption, and disappears before anyone can ask their name. Reports of sisters with no known order, leading planetary uprisings by sheer charisma, preaching hymns the Ecclesiarchy never wrote, but that still sound true. For every confirmed engagement, 10 more are left undocumented. The truth is, no one knows how many sisters operate beyond the rift. Not even the Ecclesiarchy can answer for them all. What began as an arm of faith has become a decentralised wildfire of conviction spreading wherever darkness reigns. Yet even within the Imperium Sanctus, the half of the galaxy still tethered to Terra, the Sisterhood has evolved. In the wake of the Great Rift, with Terra once again under threat, the High Lords of Terra look to their oldest warriors, not the Space Marines, not the Inquisition. They turn to the Abbess of the Adepta Sororitas. After centuries of vacancy, the ancient post was restored and filled by a living legend, Morven Vaal, Canoness of the Order of the Argent Shroud, now elevated to lead the entire Sisterhood. Young for her station, chosen not for political loyalty, but for her unshakable resolve, Vaal has not taken to the role quietly. Where some High Lords plot in the shadows, Vaal strides onto the battlefields. She wears Purgator Mirabilis, an ancient war suit designed in the days of the Great Crusade, and wields the Lance of Illumination, a relic rumoured to glow brighter in the presence of heretics. She leads from the front, not as a symbol, but as a shield. She has no patience for bureaucracy, no tolerance for sycophants, and yet her authority grows with each campaign she survives. Under her leadership, the Adepta Sororitas have become more than a religious force. They are now an interstellar bulwark, a flexible, mobile, faith-driven shield wall for an Imperium in agony. But Vaal is not content to simply hold the line. She has declared what many whisper, this is a holy age. Not of peace, not of triumph, but of testing. A crucible in which only the faithful will remain. Her vision for the Sororitas is one of acceleration. More orders founded, more crusades launched, more shrines lit with flame and scripture. Where others see instability, she sees opportunity, to prove without doubt that the God Emperor still acts through his daughters. New Order Minoris arise weekly. Some serve niche purposes, such as the Order of the Pennant Radiance, specialising in reconsecrating warp-tainted sites. Others are battlefield focused, like the Order of the Gleaming Blade, which trains exclusively in boarding actions against heretic fleets. What unites them all is faith weaponised through function, and the galaxy needs every ounce of it. Tyranid hive fleets evolve faster than battle plans, Necron tomb worlds reawaken in dead sectors, reclaiming ancient technologies. Orc empires surge with new coherence, and chaos, always chaos, seeds doubt in the minds of the desperate, preying on the faithless with a whisper and a grin. In such times, it is not enough to fight. One must mean something, and that is where the sisters triumph. They do not need logistical chains, they do not need command structures. A single battle sister, alone on a planet of madness, can become the heart of a resistance, simply by refusing to kneel. Her bolter speaks doctrine, her presence becomes liturgy, and when she falls, the story of her death becomes a new gospel. And so they spread, through hive cities and ice moons, feudal worlds and void ships. Where the Emperor's name is fading, they write it again in blood and ash. Not because they were ordered to, but because he would demand no less. What makes the Adepta Sororitas eternal is not their armour, it is not even their training. It is that their creed is unchangeable. It does not adapt to the era, it does not shift with convenience. It is fixed, absolute and unyielding. In a galaxy where even time itself is uncertain, where warp storms twist reality and new gods rise from mortal delusion, the Adepta Sororitas are immovable truth. And that is what makes them terrifying. To the traitor, they are a reminder that redemption is impossible. To the alien, they are the fire that cannot be reasoned with. To the common Imperial citizen, they are hope made real. Not hope of peace, but of purpose. And the knowledge that someone, somewhere, is still fighting for something pure. Their hymns echo through the stars. Their relics pass from hand to hand. Their saints walk once more. And still they march, unchanged, unbroken, unyielding. Because no matter how far the galaxy falls, no matter how many stars go dark, there will always be one truth. The Sisters of Battle will endure. Thank you for listening. If it intrigued, enraged, or enlightened you, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, or share it with your battle brothers. New broadcasts incoming. But until then, may the Emperor protect. Or at least, may the warp ignore you.